This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really getting into something important. We're looking at the long-term effects of growing up with alcoholic parents, ACOA, and specifically the strong link, the clinical connection between that kind of childhood trauma and the risk of developing alcohol use disorder, AUD, later on. So our mission today is really to unpack some key sources that go beyond just the behavioral side. We want to look at the neurobiology, what happens in the brain, and really importantly, the new clinical strategies for healing. We've got data, ACE's research, treatment models, the works.
Yeah, and what's striking looking at this material is just how widespread and long-lasting this is. Addiction, it's clear. It hits the whole family. We're talking, the numbers are huge. 11 million kids in the U.S. under 18 living with a parent with AUD. That's a massive group whose development is just fundamentally shaped by instability. And those effects, they absolutely carry into adulthood.
Okay, let's unpack that environment then. What does life actually look like for a child when a parent is, caught up in their dependency? What's missing?
Well, the core issue is predictability, or the lack of it. When a parent has an active AUD, they can't consistently be a parent. So basic needs, things like food, safety, routine, structure, they become unreliable. But maybe the most damaging thing is the lack of consistent emotional warmth, that feeling of security. It's just not there, or it comes and goes wildly.
So chaos becomes the norm.
Exactly. Uncertainty rules the household. Kids might see alcohol's impact on relationships, maybe witness violence, or just deal with worries about money, about food. It's this constant feeling of being unsafe, even if they can't name why yet.
And the emotional impact must be immense. The sources talk a lot about shame, self-blame. Why do kids take that on? It wasn't their fault.
It's almost a default setting for children, biologically. If a caregiver isn't meeting their needs or is abusive, the child thinks, it must be me. If I was better, if I was quieter. It creates this really deep, persistent feeling of being unworthy. And that self-blame, that's what often fuels problems later. In school, making friends, they carry that feeling of being flawed out into the world.
Yeah, I found the part about accelerated maturity really compelling. This idea that some kids become caretakers, right? For siblings, even for the parent. They build some positive traits, but the sources say the cost is huge.
Yeah.
What is that high cost?
Oh, the cost is enormous psychological stress. Sure, they might develop amazing resilience, empathy, responsibility, but these are survival skills learned under duress. They're not the result of healthy growth. The real cost is losing their childhood. It's learning not to trust adults. And crucially, it's failing to develop their own sense of self-care, how to ask for help. They learn their value is in what they do for others, setting them up for burnout later.
Okay, so that's childhood. Now let's connect it to adulthood. What are the actual measurable risks we see down the line for adult children of alcoholics?
The stats really lay out a generational cycle. First off, ACOAs are 4 times more likely to develop issues with excessive drinking themselves. That's partly genetics, sure, but also just growing up seeing unhealthy drinking as normal.
4 times.
Yeah. And second, and this really points to that unresolved trauma, they're also 4 times more likely to pick a romantic partner who also has a substance use disorder.
Wow. So they're drawn back to that familiar chaos.
It seems that way. Subconsciously, often. And this leads to real struggles in forming healthy, stable relationships. It often connects to lower socioeconomic status, too, just because of that ongoing instability.
And this connects directly to adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. We've talked about ACEs before, but growing up with parental AUD definitely fits. What does the data show about ACEs in this group?
It's pretty stark. Studies show ACOAs report on average, about 2.1 ACEs. And why that matters clinically is because we know even one ACE significantly bumps up the lifetime risk for things like depression, obesity, and a definitely substance use disorder.
So that trauma doesn't just vanish. It shows up later as specific symptoms, right? What are the key trauma symptoms we often see in adult children of alcoholics?
The sources highlight 4 main patterns, and they often look a lot like PTSD symptoms. First is hypervigilance. This is like being constantly on high alert, always scanning the room, reading people, anticipating danger, even when they're actually safe. They had to be that way as kids to survive, and the switch just never turned off.
Right, like their internal alarm system is just stuck on high all the time.
Exactly, exhausting. Second is an intense need for control. Childhood felt helpless, right? So as adults, they try to control everything, their life, situations, sometimes even other people. It's an attempt to create the safety and predictability they never had.
Makes sense in a difficult way.
Third is difficulty with emotions. As kids, showing sadness or anger might have been dangerous, so they learn to suppress it, hide it. But in adulthood, that often means they have trouble feeling or expressing any strong emotion, even joy or love. It's like an emotional numbing. And finally, low self-esteem. Like we touched on, kids see themselves reflected in their caregivers. If that caregiver is absent, unreliable, focused on addiction, the child internalizes feeling deficient, leads to chronic self-doubt, trouble accepting positive feedback.
So if those are the outcomes, let's get into the science. The why. Why does this early trauma make someone so vulnerable to addiction later?
Well, first look at the timing. The sources are clear. The trauma almost always comes before the alcohol dependence. The trauma happens early, the AUD develops later. It strongly suggests people start using alcohol to cope with those very symptoms we just talked about, the hypervigilance, the emotional distress. Alcohol becomes a way to self-medicate.
And the ACE study data specifically for alcohol seems to back that up strongly.
It really does. Remember that 7.2-fold increased risk for AUD with 4 or more ACEs? That's significantly higher than the 4.5-fold increase for illicit drug use. It suggests alcohol might be particularly effective, unfortunately, at temporarily calming the specific kind of storm that this developmental trauma creates in the nervous system.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into the neurobiology.
Mm-hmm.
When we say early stress causes long-lasting changes, what systems in the brain are we talking about?
Primarily, two key systems get impacted. First, there's the brain's stress response system, the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Think of it like the body's main stress thermostat.
Okay.
Chronic early stress can essentially break that thermostat or at least reset it way too high. The HPA axis becomes dysregulated, so the person is living in a state of constant, low-level physiological stress, making them vulnerable to stress-related problems and more likely to seek something external to calm it down. Second, this early trauma also messes with the mesocorticolimbic dopamine system. That's the brain's reward pathway. Changes here affect how sensitive someone is to pleasure, to positive reinforcement.
So double hit, basically. Stress system on overdrive, reward system potentially under-responsive.
Exactly. That combination creates a real vulnerability to addiction. The brain is searching for something powerful, like substances, to either calm the stress or provide that missing sense of reward or normalcy. And then you layer on potential genetic predispositions interacting with that environment, like variations in genes controlling stress hormones. It gets complex.
It really does. So given this huge overlap, sources say maybe 50% or more of people in addiction treatment also have PTSD. How are clinicians actually treating both things together now?
Right. This has been a big shift. Historically, the model was sequential. You had to get sober first, sometimes for months or even a year before they'd even touch the trauma therapy. The fear was talking about trauma would trigger a relapse.
But that's changing.
Definitely. The newer data really supports an integrative model, treating both the addiction and the trauma at the same time. And what's crucial, and maybe surprising to some, is that this approach works. It leads to better outcomes overall, and importantly, it doesn't seem to increase relapse rates like people feared. It actually lets people start addressing the reason they started using substances much earlier in their recovery.
Okay, so what kind of therapies are used in this integrated approach, especially for the PTSD side?
There are a few main types of cognitive behavioral therapies, or CBT, that are really effective. First, you have exposure-based therapies. These are often seen as the gold standard. It involves carefully, gradually confronting the trauma-related memories and feelings. This could be in vivo exposure, facing safe but anxiety-provoking situations, or imaginal exposure, reprocessing the traumatic memory itself in a safe therapeutic space to reduce its power.
That sounds incredibly difficult, but necessary.
It takes courage, absolutely. That's why it's done carefully alongside addiction support. Second, there's cognition-focused therapy. This targets those negative core beliefs we talked about, feeling unsafe, untrusting, unworthy. It helps people identify and change those unhelpful thought patterns learned in childhood.
And rewriting the internal script.
Precisely. And third, there's stress inoculation training. This is very practical. It's about teaching skills to manage the symptoms now. Things like relaxation techniques, how to handle difficult emotions, being assertive, solving problems. It gives people tools other than substances to cope.
And what about medications? Is there a role for pharmacology in treating both?
Yes, definitely, but with some caution. Clinicians are generally wary of using medications with high abuse potential, like benzodiazepines for anxiety in this group, for obvious reasons. However, medications specifically for reducing alcohol use, like naltrexone or disulfiram, are often strongly recommended. They've been shown to work well, improving drinking outcomes even when someone has ongoing PTSD symptoms.
So targeting the alcohol use directly is still key.
Absolutely. And looking ahead, there's interesting research on other medications. Prazosin seems promising for helping with PTSD-related nightmares and sleep problems. And some anticonvulsants, like topiramate, might help both alcohol dependence and trauma anxiety, possibly by acting on glutamate systems in the brain. Still early days for some of these, but promising.
Okay, so for someone listening right now, maybe recognizing some of these patterns in themselves, acknowledging that the past is still impacting them, what are the first steps towards addressing that trauma based on what support organizations suggest?
It's a process, definitely not overnight. The first step they often outline is to explore the past history. This means really allowing yourself to move past denial, to start acknowledging and grieving what happened. The point isn't blame, it's about understanding your own story, your own reality.
Acknowledging it for yourself.
Exactly. Step 2 is connect the past with the present. How are those childhood experiences showing up today? Is it the hypervigilance, the control issues, relationship patterns? Making that specific link gives you a clear path for what needs to change. Third is challenge those internalized beliefs. Remember the I'm unworthy or it was my fault thoughts. This step is about actively identifying and dismantling those harmful beliefs learned long ago and starting to build healthier ones.
That sounds like hard but crucial work.
It is. And the final step, often mentioned, is learn new skills. This is about consciously developing the emotional regulation and communication skills you might not have learned then. But it's also about learning to trust and use the skills you did develop, like resilience or responsibility, in healthy, balanced ways, not out of compulsion or survival mode.
That's a really powerful reframe, taking those survival traits and harnessing them for recovery for yourself.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from all this research is that these symptoms, the hypervigilance, the need for control, the emotional distance, they aren't character flaws. They are sophisticated protective strategies developed to survive an impossible situation. Seeing them that way is key to healing.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot today. How parental AUD creates this instability, how it impacts neurobiology, leads to ACEs, and shapes adult life through trauma symptoms like PTSD. And importantly, how integrated treatment offers real hope. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We want to leave you with a final thought to consider. We've seen the strong neurobiological link, how early trauma can actually rewire the brain's stress and reward pathways, increasing addiction vulnerability. So thinking about prevention beyond individual therapy later on, what new societal strategies could we explore to stabilize the environments for at-risk kids before these deep neurological changes fully set in? Something to think about. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.